Genesis 6, 5, and it says, And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil, only evil continually. And he repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and he grieved him at his heart. Folks, I look at that verse number 6, and it says, And he repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and he grieved him at his heart. I couldn't help but to think, how wicked could a generation be that he made the Lord, that he grieved him at his heart. The loving and so kind God that we serve, he was grieved by the wickedness of the people on the earth. Folks, know that we live in different times. Know that we're living in different times, in the midst of a wicked generation. I was thinking when I was writing this message, and I thought about when I was growing up, and I think that many of you could probably relate with me. And do you remember growing up, did any of you ever dare to talk back to your parents? If I try to talk back to my mom, I'm telling you, that lady would have committed some crimes. And I tell you, she would have been proud of it if I dared to speak back to her. Very proud, and if I would have dared to even say, I'm calling the cops, she would have handed me the phone and said, here you go, I'll call him for you. Come pick up this little punk. He's sitting on my couch. You can take him. I did it. She would have done it proudly. Folks, we live in a very different generation. I was at the store recently, and I saw a little boy throwing a tantrum in front of his mother. And I was having these flashbacks to when I was a little boy. We're going to call him Johnny. And I'm thinking about Johnny, and Johnny, put the candy down. Your mama is telling you to put the candy down. Johnny wouldn't listen. It took me right back to, I almost went and just took the candy away from him and put it down for him. Folks, as we look around, we live in definitely different generation. Wickedness on the earth has increased. And folks, I believe that today, we are far beyond disobedience to our parents. Far beyond disobedience to our parents. Folks, Genesis 6:5 says, And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And I thought about that word. It says, and that every imagination of the thoughts. So he's telling us that every imagination. So, but it begins in our imagination. But I think it goes farther than just the imagination. It goes farther down to the purpose and the desire of man in order to be a wicked generation. Not only do we have this evil imagination, but it drives us to the evil purposes and evil desires. This wicked generation, folks, speaks lies. It is prideful. It loves violence. And folks, they might speak peace, but we know that in this evil and wicked generation, their heart is filled with mischief. This wicked generation, folks, curses their parents. And listen to me, they don't seek God. Nevertheless, do they ever wonder, do they fear God? And I want you to keep this in mind towards the end of the message. What I've just said, and I'll repeat it one more time. They don't seek God. And nevertheless, do they fear God or believe in God? This generation, folks, is going astray as soon as they are born, and it is spreading like a wildfire, the wickedness of this generation. And follow me here. You will see why I'm speaking to you about this generation today. Let's go over to follow me to Psalm 58:3. And it's not just... The psalmist David wrote about this wicked generation, the generation that he was living in. Things haven't changed, folks, since Genesis 6. Psalm 58:3. One day I'll be as fast as Pastor. Psalms 58:3, it says, The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they're born, speaking lies. Speaking lies. Folks, this generation simply does not know the Lord's way. Again, if we go back to Genesis 6, God was ready to just zap the whole world in chapter 6, the very beginning. It only took 6 chapters for God to say, I am done with this. I should just get rid of all of you. You're causing grief to my heart. And I've repented. I've changed my mind that I created you. Folks, so today I'd like to ask you, what are we doing about our generation? Brother Jess spoke earlier today, and somewhere in there, I got the same idea. What are we doing about our young generation? Because so many times it's so easy to just sit back and judge them, criticize them, look at them and say they're lazy, they're not doing anything, I'm tired of them. Well, folks, what are we doing to help our generation in the midst of a wicked generation? My question today is, before we lose them, before we lose their hearts, my question to you today is, do you think we can help our young men and our young women? Do you believe that we can help them today? I'll ask again, do you believe that we can help them? Well, folks, I believe so as well. How? That's what I want to talk to you today about. How can we help our younger generation in the midst of a wicked generation? How can we help them? First of all, I'd like to ask you, do you have a son or daughter? Either by blood or spiritually. Do you have a son or daughter that you're pouring your life into? Do you have someone that you pour your life into? Or are you too busy in your life to look around you and just complain about how horrible this generation is? But do you have that time to pour yourself into someone that needs that help? A young man, a young woman that needs help in their faith, in their lives. You know who did? Paul did. He poured himself into somebody. He poured himself into someone. And I'd like to ask another question. Did Paul have blood sons or daughters? No, correct? We know that he did not have a son or a daughter. But I'd like to take you over to, let's go over to Timothy, where we'll be most of the time, First Timothy. Because he surely did give us some advice on how we can help our younger generation coming up. In the midst of a wicked generation. First Timothy, in the midst of a wicked generation. And we can look around, folks, and again, I remind you, we're living in different times. It is a very wicked generation that we live in. Can we help them? Can we help them? Can we be any help to them? I believe we can, because Paul did. Paul did not have a son. He was not married. He did not have a wife. But yet, I want you to see how he expressed himself about this young man going into the ministry, Timothy. Look at what it says on 1 Timothy 1:2, which leads me to my first point on how we can help our this coming up generation, the younger ones. First of all, folks, Paul saw Timothy as his spiritual son. He saw him as a spiritual son. 1 Timothy 1:2 says, Paul in 2, it says, unto Timothy. I love how he words it. He could have said, my son. But I believe that every word in the Bible has a purpose. And God was very careful when he gave us this book. And it's amazing to see when he says unto Timothy, my own son. Do we see how he cares about Timothy? He says, this is my own son. He's taking ownership of Timothy. You are mine. You are my own son. And then on 2 Timothy 1:2, if we go forward to 2 Timothy, which will probably be most of the time today on 2 Timothy, it says 1:2, same thing. It says, to Timothy, my dearly beloved son. My dearly beloved son. And if we move forward to chapter 2 and verse 1, it says, thou therefore, my son. My son. Paul invested himself into Timothy, folks. So I like to I'd like to ask you today, are you investing yourself into anybody? Are you investing yourself into anyone? I can look around this room and I know that there are a few of you that you have invested yourself into someone, and I can actually see the results on the other someone. And it's so amazing to see young people when they come and they get around us, and just to see them when they begin to change and they begin to walk with the Lord, and we begin to see how it pays off when we begin to invest ourselves into the young ones. Who are you investing yourself today? And if you're not, I like to tell you, pray for your Timothy. Pray for your Timothy. Pray for a Timothy. If you already don't have your own. You know, folks, I was 15 years old when I knew I wanted to be spiritual. Maybe even 14, let's say when I was 12, I believe so. But by the age of 14, folks, I knew I wanted someone to look up to. I knew I wanted to know the things of God. I knew that I wanted to serve God. I knew that I wanted to serve the Lord. I knew that I wanted to render my life to Him. But unfortunately, folks, growing up, I did not have a Paul to come and say, my own son, come walk with me. Folks, at a very young age, most of us wanted to know the Lord, wanted to know about the Lord. You know, and I think many of us here, the first thing that I had when I began to come to church and I began to be in ministry, and the first thought that came to my mind just meeting Pastor Byron was, I'm a Timothy, and that's my Paul. I'm a Timothy, and that's my Paul, and I've always kept it that way. I look at my pastor and I say, that's my Paul. I will follow you because you follow Christ. And now I see him. I go out into visitations. We go out soul winning. I spend time with him, and I do nothing but watch and learn. Watch and learn. I'm soul winning. Many of us know how to do it. But when I go out soul winning with him, I stand back and watch him do it. When he's speaking to someone, I stand back and listen to how he speaks to someone. I watch him and just see how he handles situations. And I say, Lord, I am so grateful for my Paul. I am a Timothy to that man. It is crucial, folks. It is crucial that we become Pauls to our younger generation, because when those theological questions come and they want the answers, when 12, 13, 14, 15, and they start to pick up their own faith, that they're not longer under our faith, not under what their parents brought them up. And when they start to begin to question, which they will, and we can't blame them. We can't say, oh, why are you sitting there questioning God? They're not questioning God. They just have questions about faith. And they want the answers. But they won't have them if they don't have a Paul to take them under their wing and give them the answers. It is crucial, folks. You know why? Because we can see it back in Genesis. Abraham and Lot. What happened when it was time for Lot to lift up his eyes and continue on his own? What did he do? He saw the shiny stuff. He said, that's kind of shiny over there. That looks kind of great. I'm just going to go right down this way, Uncle Abraham. Because I believe that even though he was saved, because eventually we see that this man was saved, when it came time to make his own decision about faith, he chose the wrong decision because he was living under somebody else's spirituality. He wasn't living his own spirituality. And that's exactly what will happen with our young men and women, folks. When they grow, they will have to pick up their own spirituality, and they will need a Paul to grab them and walk alongside with them. And if we don't, folks, we cannot sit here and complain about how wicked our generation is today. In the midst of a wicked generation. It is crucial, folks, that we invest ourselves to our Timothys. You know why? Because sadly, listen to what my next statement. Sadly, folks, and I'm sure you've seen it happening. Many kids come, many other young men and women come. By the time it's time to graduate, they graduate high school, but they also graduate church, and they never come back. Have you seen that happening? Very often it happens. Why? Because there was not a Paul to teach a young Timothy. So my first point was, do you have a spiritual son? Because Paul surely did have a spiritual son, my own son. And how much I would have said, I would have wished that somebody would, when I was growing up, that it would have said, Juan, my beloved son, my spiritual son, I love you. You are mine, my own. Let me pour myself into you. And it didn't happen until I met Pastor Byram. And by the grace of God, I'm standing here today. But how many did not make it? Because I can look back and see many of my friends that I grew up, not this church obviously, but at a different church that are not serving the Lord anymore. Matter of fact, almost borderline becoming atheist because they did not have a Paul to walk alongside their Timothy. First point, folks, is who is your spiritual son? Who is your spiritual son? You know, the funny thing to me is that so many times, well, it's not funny, but we'll come to church and we want accountability, and we talk about accountability all the time. Some of us have friends that can go. They have this. They can see everything that we see on our phones, and they keep us accountable. And we talk about accountability. Well, folks, I'd like to tell you today, you have accountability, and it is right at home all the time if you have any kids. Those eyes are watching you at all times. So before you come and ask me, hey, Juan, can you be my accountability partner? I'd like to tell you, if you have a son or a daughter spiritually or blood, I'd like to tell you, you have them. They're sitting right at home and they're watching you every single day of your life. What greater accountability do you need? When you have those little ones, the ones growing up watching us. Let's go over to 2 Timothy 3:1. And it leads me to my second point. First point is, do you have a spiritual son in the midst of this wicked generation? Because complaining about it won't do anything. Won't cause any difference. It will happen when we pour ourselves into our young Timothys. 2 Timothy 3:1, let's see what else Paul tells his son, this young man that he's getting ready to go into the ministry. It says, these know also. He's giving him a warning. Giving Timothy a warning. These know also. He's warning him. What's he warning him? That in the last days, and you guys that know me, no, I'm not going into prophecy, I promise. That in the last days, perilous times shall come. Timothy, let me tell you something. There will be a time where it will be very stressful to serve the Lord. Timothy, it will be very hard to serve the Lord in the midst of the wicked generation. Let me warn you. What was the warning? For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, verse 2, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. And then I love what it says, 4 and 5, it says, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Lovers of Timothy, you're going to have to serve God. You're going to have to work with, you're going to have to continue on preaching. Even so, you're going to be surrounded with men without natural affections, false accusers. And then he says in number 5, and this is where I stopped and I said, geez, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And then he says, from such turn away. From such turn away. Have we ever spent any time with our young men, with our young women, and give them the same warning that Paul was given to the young man Timothy? You will be in a world surrounded by these type of men. You, Timothy, you continue to serve the Lord. You stand fast. You go and preach. You're going to have a target in your back, but you continue to do your work. And from these men, you turn away. You turn away from them. For of these sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with diverse lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Second point. Have we warned them? These know also. This is the world you will be living in. This is what you will see. This is where you will walk amongst. This is the type of man that you will be surrounded with. Timothy, I need you to continue serving God. I need you to continue preaching the word, Timothy. Have we ever spent any time with our young man to give him this very same warning that was given to Timothy? In the midst of a wicked generation. Timothy, you're going to find yourself in a sea, in the midst of all this wickedness. The very same wickedness that takes us back to Genesis 6, where God said, it repented me that I created you. The very same type of wickedness that it said, that where he says, it grieves my heart. Timothy, you will be in a generation likewise. Continue to serve God. Continue to love the Lord. Stay away from this man, especially those that put an appearance and they look like they're holy. They look like they're spiritual. No. Be wise. Be wise. Look at their fruits. That's right. And if you know it's not real, stay away from them. Keep away from them, Timothy. In the last days, there will be an apostasy coming. Stand up and preach. Stand up and preach. This is what the world will be like. Stand up and preach. Having a form of godliness, corrupt minds. From such, my friend, turn away. From such, my friend, turn away. And folks, let's go over to Psalm 11:6. And I think that our young men, our young women need to look at how the psalmist is expressing his heart in this verse. And I wish that when I was young, somebody would have came and spoke to me and said, hey, this is what you will face, but you need to stand on the Lord, because if not, look at Psalms 11:6. It says, upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire and brimstone, and a horrible tempest. These shall be the portion of their cup. You would have told me that when I was 15. I would forget them. Take me to church. As soon as I heard that verse, take me to church, please. So, folks, let's go back to Timothy, 2 Timothy 3:10. Not only does Paul warn this young man Timothy, know that this will happen, but he also tells him. But he also tells him the following on 2 Timothy 3:10. And it leads me to my next point, my third point. And I was so blown away by when I read, let's just read it. It says, 3:10, it says, therefore I endure all things for the elect's sakes, that they may also, sorry, I'm in the wrong Timothy. No, I am in the right Timothy. Yeah, I am. Hang on one second. I'm just reading the wrong chapter. There you go. Chapter 3, verse 4. Let's see. Chapter 3, verse 10. There you go. But thou hast fully known my doctrine. But listen to what he says next. And really, I just thought about our pastor when I read this. It says, but thou hast fully known my doctrine, manner of life. Manner of life. Purpose, faith, long-suffering, charity, and patience. So he's telling Timothy, you've seen me. You know my doctrine. You know what I've taught you. But not only have you known what I've taught you, you have seen me walk the walk, talk the talk. You've seen that what I say, it's a manner of life of mine. I don't just get in the pulpit and I preach. I don't just go to the synagogues and debate with the Jews. You've seen how I treat people. You see how I love people. You see how I love the souls. You've seen my sufferings. You see my persecutions. You've seen it all, Timothy. You know that I'm real about this. You know that I'm not faking this around. You know that I walk the walk. You know that that I talk the talk. His doctrine wasn't something, it wasn't just the doctrine, folks. It was the way that Papa Paul lived. that he was telling him, hey, just, I taught you many things, but we could sit here, folks, and as I said earlier at the beginning, we can teach him. We can teach him how to defend the faith and go out there and speak to a Mormon, speak to a Jehovah's Witness, and we can give them all the right answers, which we do want them to know the right answers, so that they can defend their faith. But folks, that's not going to matter if they don't see us living what we're preaching. He's telling him, you know my doctrine, but you know that my doctrine is a way of living. He's telling Timothy. He says, you've seen my purpose, you've seen my faith, you've seen my long suffering, you've seen my charity, you've seen my patience. And this is what separates me in the midst of a wicked generation. Now, Timothy, go on and learn. But folks, there is one person, again, as I say, Pastor Byram is my Paul. And I was looking at a video he's been posting videos from Congo. And we've had him here on a Saturday night with the Spanish people. And I was just so amazed that man does not change. What you see over there, you'll see it here. Amen. What you see over there, eating the weird stuff over there, laughing about it, you see it here, but with hot sauce on Saturday nights. And even if it's hot, that man will still take a bite just because he becomes one of us. Because he walks the walk and talks the talk. And it isn't something where there's a switch where he's just like, no, I'm with the Spanish ministry. Oh, now I got to be a Spanish. No. You will just walk right into the room and he's just one of us. His manner of life. His doctrine is his manner of life. His doctrine is his manner of life. But folks, many times, we'll sit back and say, listen here, young buck. I got something to teach you today. Why don't you sit around right there and let me give you a lecture. Listen here, young man. I think I know way more than you. I know, while you go, I already came. And all that you know already, man, I already even forgot all that stuff. I know way more than you can ever think. And that's sometimes how we treat these young men and young women. Folks, and I'd like to ask you, have we accomplished anything having those type of attitudes? Listen here, young man. Let me teach you something. Has it done anything? Does it do anything? I don't think so. You know what will cause an impact? When we live our lives like the doctrine that we claim. That's what will cause them. Because he's telling them, look at the manner of life. You've seen my manner of life. I'm teaching you doctrine, but I live my doctrine. Folks, when our kids, our spiritual sons, our spiritual daughters see us, do they just see, oh, well, my daddy, my mommy knows a lot of Bible, but they don't see the manner of life? It's not a doctrine. Our doctrine is not a manner of life. It's just a bunch of knowledge we drop into our heads, and that's it. What do they see? Our spiritual kids. What do they see? What do they see, folks? Go over to 1 Kings 3:4. There was a pastor I was listening to last week, and I was so moved by one of the statements he made on preaching, and he gave us a little short testimony in 1 Kings 3, and we'll stop there for a second. And while he was preaching here, there's something that just captivated me, and I said, Lord, I want my son to one day have those. I want him to repeat the very same words that are coming out of that man's mouth, and it was this. He said, I came to serve the Lord because I watched my daddy. I saw what the Lord did in my daddy's life. I saw how he loved God. I saw how he served the people, and that is what drove me to want to serve God. It wasn't the culture that I was brought in. It wasn't because I was raised in a Christian home, but I witnessed what God was doing with my daddy, and I wanted to serve God when I saw how what God was doing in his life. And he says, and this is the reason why I serve God. That's what drove me. That's what drove my heart to want to serve this God, because I saw it. And you know who else said this? Solomon. Solomon said this of his daddy. Let's go to 3, 4, and 7. 1 Kings 3, 4, and 7. And listen to how Solomon expresses himself. He says, "And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer up on the altar. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, 'Ask, what shall I give thee?' And look at the response. And Solomon said, 'Thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in the uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him his great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is in this day.'" I've seen what you done with my daddy David. I saw what you did. I saw how he served you in truth and love, and I saw it, and now I am here. Now I'm ready to take up on that throne. But it is because I saw that I can trust the very same God that my daddy was trusting. If my dad can trust him, I can trust him, because I can see it in his life, and I've seen how throughout life he's kept my dad, he's trusted him, and Solomon's saying, because I saw what he did. Because I saw what he did. So does our manner of life, folks, does it match up with our doctrine? Or is it just doctrine and manner of life? Because it won't matter how much doctrine we give them, folks. They need to see us. They need to see us. Solomon said it. I know what you've done with my papa. 2 Timothy, let's go back to Timothy, folks, 3:14. That was my fourth point. My third point was my doctrine, manner. You see my manner of life. And then 2 Timothy 3:14, he tells him something else. He tells him in 14, he says, "Not only have you known my doctrine of life, my manner of life," but then now he tells him, now in 14, he says, "But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of." Continue in the things that you have learned. Folks, what have they learned from us? Our spiritual sons and daughters, or our spirituals, or what have they learned from us? Because he's telling them, continue on what you learned. He's not saying, go on and start learning. He's saying, continue on what you have already learned. That's right. So what have we taught our kids? Can we go to our spiritual sons and daughters and tell them, hey, I know you've been around me for a while. Now, stand up and continue on what I've taught you. Can you go to someone and tell them that? Continue on what I have taught you. Paul said, hey, I've taught you many things. Now I want you to continue on them. Go on. What have we taught our young women and men, folks? Or do we just go and write a long list for them? And I think that's the reason why they probably don't like church anymore. And this is allowed, this isn't allowed. You can do this, you can do that. You can't do that, you can't do this, and you can't do that. Is that what we've done? Just give them a long list of what you can and cannot do? Or have we actually taken the time to teach him? To teach him the things that he said, the things that has learned, the things of God. He learned the things of God because of Paul. Are we teaching them the things of God? Are we spending time with them? When they have, I remember one time, and I was so full of joy with one of my daughters. We were reading the Bible, she actually didn't really ask the question, but I made something clear to them from the Bible, and she said, "Oh, that's what he meant. Oh, I didn't know. I was a little bit confused about that. That's what he meant." And I was such joy. And then I realized they need us. Folks, if you're spending 2 hours in your Bible, great, awesome. Please continue to do it. But who are you investing it on now? Because what's all that knowledge doing in your head? Are you just ready to go and win a debate? Is that why you want that knowledge? Great. Great. I do want you to know how to defend your faith again. I do want you to know how to go and answer a Jehovah's Witness. But folks, it doesn't stop there. That's not where it stops. Continue on what that has learned. What have they learned from us, folks? Genesis 18:19. And I put a lot of Bible in here because Brother Andrew said he likes a lot of Bible. So I said, if they say anything, I'll just talk to Brother Andrew. What have they learned from us, folks? Not only have they seen our manner of life, but what have they learned from us? What are we teaching them? Another, this is actually one of my life verses. And it's going to be in Genesis 18:19. Look at how God speaks about Abraham. He says, "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the" what? The what? The way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of him. For I know him. I know he will bring those kids I know he will bring them to me. I know he will do his job. I know he will raise them in the way of the Lord. Can he trust us? Has he trusted you already? You know what, folks? Honestly, I had to sit back, and this actually wasn't even part of the sermon, but there was an instance here. Something was happening, and somebody made a comment to me, and I said, you're right. It is my fault that that's happening. And it isn't until I change it that I may be able to be a better Paul to those Timothys that are following me around. And one thing I do tell you, folks, if you do have a Timothy, and that Timothy is following you, it will show what you're teaching them. It will show if you're being a good Paul to them. And there were certain things that I said, I need to work on that because I'm being a horrible Paul to that person. Continue on what that house learned. Can he trust you with Timothy? Because we could go out, we could get out of here and say, Lord, give me a Timothy, but can he trust you with a Timothy? You already have him at home, those that have children. Those that don't, those that want a spiritual Timothy, can he trust you with him? Because he said of Abraham, I know he will raise him up in the way of the Lord. Would you raise him up in the way of the Lord? Or what will you do if God does give you a Timothy? That is, folks, if we're not teaching them, it will be very, very easy when this new age garbage comes and tries to capture their minds. If we're not teaching them the things of the Lord. You know what they need to hear today, folks? The hell's still hot. You know what they need to hear, folks? The hell is still eternal. Folks, if we're not teaching them, don't be surprised if your children comes as Caesar when they spend all the time in Rome. When they spend 8 hours in the public system, as Brother Andrew was speaking earlier, that is not anymore education, it's indoctrination. Don't be shocked when they come back as Caesars, when they're spending 8 hours in Rome and 8 hours, when they get home, another 8 hours in social media, and they're spending, I don't know how long in Rome. Don't be surprised when they come back as Caesars. Why? Because we don't take the time to teach them the things of God. We don't take the time to tell them, hey, why don't we go out and again invest ourselves in them? And what's going on in your life? Just as Pastor did when he met me, and he would take me out and we'd spend time together. One time we drove down to Portland, and now 4 years in, I saw that he was creating a Timothy out of me. He wanted me, and you guys that we work with Pastor closely to him, we know that he's usually he just wants us to come around along the ride and just watch him work. And once he's not around us, now you go and work. Now everything that I taught you, you go put it to work. Folks, we have a Timothy. Can he trust us with our children in the midst of a wicked generation? And then remember at the beginning when I said they do not know God, and I said hold that thought towards the end. They don't know God. They don't fear God. It's a very wicked generation. Boy, you know what, folks? I think that sometimes we're probably a part of that issue, part of the problem, because look at what it says on back on 3:14 of Timothy. It is crucial, folks, that we give ourselves to these young men and young women, because they're being raised up to not care about the Lord, to doubt to not just. It's amazing the things I see outside and just how the enemy is just after them and just wants to destroy their lives. And look at 3:15, 2 Timothy. It is crucial, folks, that we give ourselves to them. So we can't just complain and say, well, they don't want God. They don't want to search for God. Well, look at what it says on 15. It says, and from a child. From when? From a child. He didn't say from when you became a teenager or from when you finally hit 18 and you became an adult. He said from a child. It says, what? Thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them. But continue thou in the things of, on 15. And that from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto what? Do you see the problem, folks? Do you see why there's so many young, even in the midst of the Christian churches, that may not be saved? He says, you follow me. I'm going to teach you. And all of this will lead you where? Into salvation. At first, we saw that he said, well, they don't want God. They don't fear God. They don't search for God. Could it be because they don't have Paul to teach them the things of God? To make them wise unto salvation? Could that be it? Is he saying, if you follow me, if you listen to me, my son, you become wise unto salvation. You'll understand the things of God. You will know that the Jesus is the Lord. You will know that he came and gave his life for you. You will understand these things, and then you will become wise until salvation. Wise until salvation. Folks, again, I like to tell you today, they need to hear us. They need to know that hell is still hot and the hell is still eternal, and that Jesus Christ is the Lord, and he is the way, and he is the only way. Amen. They still need to hear these things, because you know what the new age garbage, the new world order religion is telling them? You can have whichever God you want and you go right into God. No, folks. Jesus is still the only way and the only way to get to heaven. And it hasn't changed and it will never change. He's still the only way. And if you don't come before the Lord and make him your Lord and Savior, you will end up in the eternal pit of fire. They still need to hear these things, folks. But we're not doing it. We got to help them build the foundation, folks. Because they've got a big target on their back, especially now. We have a target on our backs. Now imagine the young ones. Even a bigger target. Especially when we're not paying attention to them. When we're not spending time with them. When we're not when we're not teaching them the things of God. The enemy sitting there just licking his lips. I'm going to go get that one right there. Folks, are you a Paul to someone? Or I like to even ask you, are you a Timothy to anyone? Are you humble enough to be a Timothy to anybody? Because I like to tell you, I am a Paul to certain people. But I'm very humble to say I am a Timothy. First of all, my pastor. But there are other brothers in here, like Brother Jess, that I humbly say that is another Paul that I can follow. Because first of all, they follow Christ. And second of all, because they will teach me the things of God. Let's help them, folks, in the midst of a wicked generation, that they may be wise unto salvation. Start a home. Start a home. Be a Paul at your home. Be a Paul to your family. But also be someone else's Timothy. Many times I express to our pastor how privileged I am to walk along his side, the side of him. Many, many times I told him how thankful I am. Many of you that walk with him too, but probably are just as thankful as I am. Maybe even more thankful than I am. But I can tell you, folks, that not only have I learned how to preach, have I learned all these things all the things that he has taught me. That's all great and awesome, and I'll always be thankful. But the main thing that I've learned from him was the way of salvation. When he made it very clear how to be saved, he made me wise unto salvation. And I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to be saved. I want to be saved because this man came and took me down and said, you, my Timothy, now follow me. And to finish up, folks, do you realize that it only takes one generation biblically to forget about God? Folks, it only takes one generation biblically to forget about God. But Paul loved Timothy. We read, and for the lack of time, we know that he prayed for Timothy. It was his jewel to his crown to see this young man, to teach this young man. It was his jewel. And right there on Timothy, folks, before he warned them and he told them, continue on, go on. You know, he had taught him a few other things before he got to the warnings. He taught him how to be responsible. On verse 1:6 to chapter 2:1, he taught him how to be a discipling teacher, how to be humble enough to be disciple, but also go and teach others. He taught him how to be a single-minded soldier, as the brother spoke last week. He taught him how to be an enduring husband. He taught him how to be a diligent workman. He taught him how to be a sanctified vessel unto the Lord. And he taught him how to be a gentle servant. You want somebody to teach our kids, to teach our generation? There are 7 things that we can teach them, folks. Be responsible. Be a discipling teacher. Be a single-minded soldier. Stand fast. Be an enduring husband. It will be hard to be a husband, but I want you to endure through it. Be a diligent workman, a hard worker. Put your hands to work. But also be a sanctified vessel that the Lord may use you. And be a gentle servant. Be a gentle servant. Have we taught any of this to our Timothy's, folks? In the midst of a wicked generation? And I tell you, because there's no room for failure. There's no room for failure. There's no room for failure, folks. In the midst of a wicked generation. Look and to finish off, Psalms 24:6. This is that generation that I want to be part of. Psalm 24:6 says, this is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob, Selah. This is the generation that seeks the Lord. This is that generation that seeks the Lord. So folks, today I'd just like to leave you with this. Pray for a Timothy. Pray for your Timothy in the midst of a wicked generation. Let's be a generation of Pauls leading Timothy's into unto salvation. And today, folks, you may not be saved today. You may not be a Timothy. You may not be a Paul. But you could be wise until salvation if you're not already saved. That's right. You don't need to be a Paul. You don't need to be a Timothy. You might just be starting. That's great. But one thing you can do is be wise until salvation today. Because there's one truth that still applies today, and that is that Jesus is still the only way. Yes, will you be wise until salvation today and call into the Lord if you haven't already done so? And if you have, folks, let's give ourselves to these young men and women. They need us. They need us in the midst of this wicked generation. Let's pray.